Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We provide fan-oriented and analytic discussions on a variety of animated shows, movies, and anime, including Steven Universe, Gravity Falls, and Rick and Morty. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm joined by Delaney Stovall.
Hello.
Today, Delaney and I will be discussing the latest episode of Rick and Morty. As always, when we're discussing Rick and Morty, these discussions are for mature audiences only, as that is what the show is. So, but the rest of our podcasts are age appropriate to their audience. But this one, mature audiences only. And I preface that before giving the title of the episode, Erotic Assimilation. I guess we probably need to do the warning before the episode titles here. And we'll be discussing all of this very interesting episode facets, including the very fascinating ending. You can find us at overlyanimated.com and all the details of the podcast there. But let's get right into it. Delaney, what did you think of Erotic Assimilation?
I really enjoyed it. It was, and again, we took typical science fiction and just like story tropes and then just completely like flipped them, which it was always fun, and it was done in a very interesting way this episode, and the beginning of this episode is just great anyway, like where they're all just singing in the spaceship. It's great.
It's great?
Yeah, it's great.
Did you think this was better or worse than the first two this season?
Ooh, it's rough. I don't think I'd say maybe like how this episode goes about like playing with tropes might be more interesting than the second episode, but I will say I like the second episode better than this episode, but the ending to this episode like blows the other two like out of the water. Like, what is the ending to this episode?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I think this is like clearly the least funny of the three, and potentially one of the least funny of all of the Rick and Morty episodes. So in that regard, I'm not the biggest fan of this one. It's certainly very interesting thematically at the end. And I think that a lot of people are maybe giving slightly too much credit to it. Like, it has really interesting themes and kind of things to discuss as the episode approaches, and it's going to make for great discussion on here. But it didn't necessarily come together maybe the way I've seen AV Club give it an A-. Like, I'd probably, I don't know, this one's like a B- for me.
Yeah.
For Rick and Morty one. Like, compared to the last episode, it's clearly much less, funny in general, and I think a little less interesting. Like, I also feel like their execution of the basic concept of this episode, the hive mind species, right? I think that's like less fascinating than their normal sci-fi like takes on things. It's kind of one note a little bit in terms of it's just it's a hive mind and stuff like that. I mean,
they just kind of skate over it too. Like, they don't like.
It almost takes too much of a backseat to the character, like, look at Rick that we get. Like, I think you could argue that the concept isn't explored to its full extent because they focus on Rick. But I think that's ultimately a good thing because they didn't maybe have too many angles to go on in terms of the hive mind concept. Ultimately, still, I would say a good episode. And I like its assuming that we go back to these really well-executed, high-concept, high-humor episodes. I really like this episode's function within the season. So, like, for now, this is like a B- or something like that, but, like, if the season ultimately picks up and is really excellent, I think this is going to be one of the most important ones, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go through the episode kind of thing by thing, and we'll get to the great ending at the end, I guess. This episode starts to me like the most Doctor Who that the show has ever been. There's a distress beacon, and then they go to an abandoned ship. Right. To me, this is just totally reminiscent of. There wasn't a distress beacon, I guess, but the Doctor gets those a lot in Girl in the Fireplace, my favorite Doctor Who episode.
Yeah, the best episode.
I mean, yeah, I very, very good. Would recommend, and it's just totally like the empty ship in the beginning. Totally reminds me of that. I don't know. Sometimes the show is just so much like a Doctor Who satire, and just maybe even if you want to ignore the satire part, just like a Doctor Who-y type show, and it's never reminded me more of it than the beginning of here. But Rick says that you should always check out distress beacons because 9 out of 10 times it's a ship full of dead aliens and there's a bunch of free shit, and then 1 out of 10 it's a deadly trap.
quality line.
It's a pretty quality line. Yeah, I like the logic here. Would you take the risk on a bunch of free shit with the ship full of dead aliens 9 out of 10 times?
I mean, who wouldn't?
It's pretty good odds there.
I mean, if Doctor Who has taught me anything,
yeah.
The problem with Doctor Who is that the Doctor just shows up when bad things happen. So, maybe not with the Doctor, but any other time, yes.
This is like, I think this is a great, like, this is totally what would happen if the Doctor in Doctor Who wasn't so moral, or, moral in his own way. It was just, it's like, yeah, just take the free shit from dead alien ships. That's totally what would happen.
Yeah, or like, and you watch movies all the time, and like, there's always something terrible has always happened, but like, that like I'd say realistically, like, this happens, but it's just if something gets you in space, like, there's no hope for you, so like, of course, there's just gonna be stuff floating around all the time.
Yeah. But once they're on the ship, they meet Unity. They have the whole thing with that.
About he was gonna frame whatever.
Yeah, he was gonna do the mark of the whatever, and then it's like police are stereotyping. Yeah,
that was good.
Yeah, it's good, and they have the whole thing with the two of them are not seem pretty chill with it or something, and it's Unity, and they used to date. So we can talk about the concept of Unity.
One, great name. Yep, good job, Hive Mind.
Yeah. I mean, there's interesting discussions to be had, like, gender-wise, but, like, even just, like, the fundamental concept of this hive mind, like, first of all, the concept of it existing as one organism in the first place and, like, interacting in a human consciousness way is interesting, but it also dating Rick.
Of course Rick would date a hive mind, though. Like, of course.
I mean, there's a good sections on the AV Club review of this, who Alistair Wilkins, like, did the review this week. I think he did Korra and Gravity Falls reviews, at least for part of them, and he's done a good job with those. He talks about how, like, of course it's a hive mind who has to be, dating Rick, who one person couldn't possibly hold his interest long enough for that. And even a hive mind, like, he gets bored of dating hive mind eventually too.
Yes.
Yeah. Then they get to the Unity planet. What do you think of this? I don't think we have a name for it, right? Just the planet that Unity has conquered, or whatever. What do you think of this planet? Very bright.
Yes.
Kind of. They're clearly trying to depict, like, a utopian kind of theme going on here.
It's very I don't know, like, this kind of sounds stupid, but, like, I have a lot of, like, I'd say experience with, like, the hive mind concept, playing, like, Star Wars and, like, different things I've read and, like, superhero things. And, like, this was just for me, it was very, like, oh, this is very typical of, like, what they're trying to get at. The whole, like, utopia, and, I mean, it's cool. It was cool looking. It's definitely a step away from the planets we visited previously, that are usually, like, dark and, like, gritty, and because Rick, of course, goes to the seediest places in the universe.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we have this bright, fun.
This is, like, only paralleled by the female-dominated society, like, in terms of, have planets having their shit together.
Yes.
Like,
exactly.
And, of course, there's always something, like, socially interesting going on. I mean, we'll tackle the moral conundrum of this that Summer, gets into.
Yeah.
It's simultaneously a really weak and strong point for the episode, I think. But I guess before that, we get backstory occasionally. Unity says her passion for unification, like, was ignited after her and Rick broke up, and that her plan is that after she achieves Type 1 status, and she'll be accepted into the Galactic Federation, and then we'll unify the universe one planet at a time.
Like, this is just the casual
take over the universe. Kill all life in the universe.
Like, that was so great. And of course Rick's just like, yeah, whatever, that's boring, let's party.
Yeah. He wants a hang glider, like Uncle Sam, crotchless, a stadium full of redheads, and what's the other thing?
He looks vaguely like his father.
Like his father, yeah. pretty great Rick thing.
Oh, and then it's really funny because before that he's like, no, not like this. And then he describes it. It's like, wow, Rick.
It's like, how long have you had this in your head since you and Uni broke up, Rick? That's incredible. So let's do, I guess, okay, so then Summer starts, objecting to all this. We meet Beta 7, voiced by Patton Oswalt. Oh, by the way, mostly the Unity is voiced by Christina Hendricks, although it's like a lot of people. It's at various points.
Yeah.
Beta 7 has a beneficial alliance with Unity, and Rick says, I think Beta 7 wants your alliance to be more than beneficial. Pretty good.
Practical.
Pretty great line, yeah. Or practical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little gamer boy.
Gamer boy, that's how you describe this.
That's what he.
How about the nice guy? I feel like that's the trope that they're going for. I mean, his name is Beta, so that's beta male. That's what they're going for. Okay, so Rick and Morty. This episode kind of has A, B, and C plots. Rick and Morty and the B plot talking about, Unity is, dealing with them at the same time as having sex with Rick all the time. Unity is making a paradise. So the whole thing with unifying. Okay, so then Unity drunk and loses like the town that Rick and Morty and Summer in, and you have the whole race war thing with the nipple people. Okay, so this is first of all, I think that was like the funniest, most clever concept, I would say, of the episode. The all summer first race war, the second people are not controlled, they instantly start rioting. Flat concentric nipple rings versus cone nipples. Which do you identify as?
What does that even mean?
The BuzzFeed quiz. Which nipple race are you?
Oh my god, that's great.
Do you have a preference here?
I mean, I feel, again, I'm gonna go with Summer and be like, trust me, they're different. I don't know.
Yeah, and then they're like, kill the no race people or something like that.
I'm an electrical engineer, and then just strips.
Yeah. Summer says, I only empowered them to follow their apparently misguided dreams. Okay, morality-wise of this hive mind taking over for people. Like, I feel like the episode loses me in that it's to a certain extent seems like they're trying to present this as like an actual moral conundrum. When watching it, it's just very obviously wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it was like, and of course they used like examples like, oh, this guy's a pedophile, and even Summer was like, so what? At least he was him, which that surprised me. Which I wasn't expecting Summer to say that. But,
I mean, that's like the summary of the entire moral thing. It's like, okay, we got there. At least he's an individual.
Yeah, it's like, alright. But, I don't know, like, I think... another thing is, like, that's kind of what Rick and Morty does, though, is, like, they take, like, a tried and true, like... I mean, we've seen this plot before, like, 400 times. Like, we know how this goes. And, like, the whole morality issue, and it's like, and then of course what they do is they take it, and then there's like, well, this is kind of dumb, let's just like move it along. So it was kind of like, I was surprised that's where we went with this episode, as quickly as it did anyway. Like, I was at least expecting it to like take a little bit longer, but
I will say they go through the concept.
They never got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they did. They went through the concept and then
pretty quickly, like noting that it might be shallow one, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that might have been the point that, like, we're just gonna flash through this, like, yeah, it's a problem, whatever. Let's just go back to.
I think when I was watching it, like, I thought, okay, this is like dumb. Unity is obviously being kind of presented as not terrible, even though they're obviously like a giant villain and stuff like that. Thinking about it later, it gets more morally interesting if you actually try to get into specifics of it, because these people are being possessed by Unity. They're essentially animals now, which I have strong moral convictions for not, harming. So it gets kind of interesting. You're eliminating the human consciousness element of it, but not the life part of it, and they're reverting to essentially automatic behavior like non-sapient species.
But then she says something. She sounds.
So Unity. They call Unity she and it. I believe.
It. Okay.
There's both. So, I think they do both.
Okay, so I'll say it for now. I suppose. I don't know. It's.
I mean, as like an entity, it would make more sense to be a genderless species, like the gems from Steven Universe.
So Unity said that, talking about, oh, this one used to be a prostitute and now she's a like electrical engineer, like something. She said there were this. So it confused me because so not only is she identifying as them, which of course makes sense, it's them, they're the Unity, they are one thing, but at the same time, so she just made her do that. So like society's still functioning, but she's still like controlling all of them. It's very strange. Like this is a very different like hive mind concept than what you usually run across, where it's like there's one leader and then like the hive just kind of does like one thing, like they all do one thing.
So you're interested in the mechanics of her like being like, because she's, I mean, there's this one avatar seemingly, which she's mostly, right?
Yeah,
the Christina Hendricks looking one, and
yeah.
then other than, but she's also possesses other people, and they all seem to be equally her, which is interesting. Yeah.
It's just, which I think that's part of why this seems more interesting, and or like this is more why the morality seems a little like off and like more of a conundrum, because like she is all of them, and then like
yeah.
So it's very strange.
I'm wondering how much they intended to like get into an interesting element of this, because yeah, you're right. It seems kind of novel in terms of this concept as taking on like each individual person, but I think that was more of done. Maybe they thought about that more in terms of how it could be cool presenting that animation wise, you know, as having this character appear as all this different characters, which I think they succeeded in. I think that was cool, although it didn't last, you know, necessarily very long. But yeah, like the race war thing, I think was maybe the funniest part of the episode.
Yeah.
Just typical. I mean, I guess they're not humans, but yeah, why are there so many? Why are these like a humanoid species without being humans? That's an interesting thought. What's the mythology of humans in the universe? Like Doctor Who, it's clearly established that humans make it to the end of time, and that they're just go over all around the universe. That's why you see humans everywhere.
And like the Earth ends, and we're like,
and like the Earth ends, but humanity survives, right?
Yeah.
But that's not. But like Rick and Morty doesn't like move into the future, really. That's the thing with Rick and Morty. It doesn't like go.
Yeah, they're just it's just time.
It's parallel
like,
at the same time. It's like,
yeah,
they don't have a time machine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. And we haven't seen, like, we just see Rick, right? Like, there aren't other humans out when they're, like, roaming around.
So why is there this humanoid species with just different types of nipples as, like, this distinguishing factor?
I mean, there's always a chance they could be just going for, like, I mean, it would be kind of ignorant to assume that, like, we're the only, like, that we only look like, we're the only ones who look like whatever, because, like...
I don't think so. The chances of another species looking, like, so similar to us, I feel like, is very small. I mean, I haven't ran the numbers on that, but I think it's...
I mean, it would depend on, like, the planet, and, like, I mean, of course, evolution-wise, like, yeah, it's, like, very rare, but, like, if you're dealing with, like, billions and billions of, like, other planets and things, and, like, there has to be other, like, systems that are like ours to, like, develop something similar.
Yeah, I mean, you're making the argument that if the universe is essentially infinite, even the smallest probabilities will come true at some point, which is how we were created in the first place, right? So, science, etc. But running into them also, this one species is also then equally improbable, but I guess maybe Rick's been everywhere. But he's also probably limited by his lifespan unless we find out he's immortal at some point.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised either. But there's, I mean, this episode also, like, it's interesting because through the B plot, not the B plot in the ABC plot, but the B plot in terms of Summer, in terms of the parents, is like, does a lot to humanize Rick, like, as much as Rick's presence in the A plot does, I think. Because we're reminded that Beth is his daughter, right? That it's not, that it's kind of, we kind of forget about that sometimes.
Well, and it's also just to think about, like, however Rick is, let's assume he's not immortal, just for now. And he's, like, how much he's, like, done in, like, however old he is. Like, what? And, like, all the places
it doesn't really make much sense, I think, yeah.
Granted, space, like, there's this whole thing that, like, space, like, it doesn't make you
if younger, time works differently there, yeah.
Yeah, like, you age differently in space.
That could explain it. I wonder if that's what they're going for. I don't know if they necessarily care.
That would be a really easy route to go if it ever
Yeah,
comes.
I think it would make sense too.
And then of course he would just go around and like pop whatever like age pills he wanted or whatever. So like if
Yeah.
he would go, he'd like, yeah, I go and get like this elixir of life stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about the B plot briefly because we're about to get to the third act of the A plot. What are your thoughts on the B plot? I'm once again not super excited by what the parents are doing.
Well, I think this one was like maybe the most well executed because
Yeah, I mean it's the most meaningful, but like I feel like Jerry Daycare was like much more.
well, okay,
funny,
Jerry Daycare
you know?
was like is the best because it was Jerry Daycare and it was everything I didn't know I wanted with an episode with Jerry. But this one, I don't know, like this one's just, I mean, it's more meaningful, and I don't know, I wasn't as like, come on, let's get back to whatever. Like I did want to see how this ended up, and I wanted to know about the core, whatever the alien's name is.
Yeah. So they don't know. They discovered the underground lair. Did we know about this? I don't even remember. I assume so.
I don't think. I mean, I would feel like, duh, he has like an underground.
Yeah.
I'm not shocked.
Yeah, that's why there's the $6,000 electric bill.
Was...
Totally a Jerry thing to not investigate that further.
Of course.
But,
Jerry's like, what is Jerry and his hip hop whatever today?
Yeah, that was.
He's dumb.
It fit with this character, but it was. I don't know.
I just continuously like.
I was not a fan of that.
I don't despise Jerry, but I feel the way I'm supposed to about.
Yeah,
him.
yeah, I agree. That we very clearly are, feeling as intended about Jerry. So we meet Bim Blam, the core block, I guess is what it's.
Yeah.
They are talking about whether he's a murderer or Rick's trying to help him, and then he gets the translator thing, and it's like both, and he says the two of you are the fucking worst, and that
he gets out. To
yeah,
so great.
It's pretty good, and that they're like they despise each other and themselves, right? That's what he says.
Yes, and then if this has anything to do with Rick, is laughable, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, burn Bim Blam, yeah.
And then he actually drops the mic, and then he picks it back up because he wants to keep it. So
yeah.
Good.
Then he goes out the garages. Morty and Summer are coming back, and is there a slow setting? He says sarcastically about the garage. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Best store ever. This is the sassiest alien. It's great.
Yeah, so like this is. I guess this is, I don't know what the B plot's trying to do. Set up development for Beth and the relationship between Beth and Rick, and at the same time Jerry and Beth, and also kind of essentially tied together with what's going on with Rick at the end. And I think it does accomplish all of that.
Yes. Well, it's funny, this is, I think, the first time that we've had, like, the A plot directly, like, mention the B plot, because Summer, before they leave, is like, if you don't get out here right now, I'm gonna tell Mom and Dad about... Which I think it's funny that, like, now they're both, like, completely involved in everything Rick does.
Yeah, I mean, we had the first episode talk about, like, have them, like, sarcastically reference, whatever Beth and Jerry are up to now. But it's, I'm not, like, I didn't necessarily enjoy watching the B-plot. That's the thing. Like,
I mean, they were just arguing the entire time.
Even, like, I understand that what it was trying to do, and I actually do think it was kind of successful at the end. Like, this episode is ultimately pretty well constructed, but I guess my criticisms are that the episode is not as enjoyable to watch as the really clever and funny ones. So, I mean, my criticisms are kind of amounting to just, be funnier show, which I think is not good, but...
Make me laugh.
Make me laugh show, but at the same time, like, I feel like this episode also can be more of an enjoyable watch while still, like, being interesting. Because, like, the ending wasn't, like, what I'm talking about, right? Like, at the ending where Rick, tries to kill himself. That's not what I'm talking about. Like, that actually was one of the most enjoyable parts of the episode. Not because I want to see Rick die, because it was so interesting, and the song was incredible. And we'll talk about that. But...
I've now listened to, like, 4 times.
Oh, yeah, it's many times. But it's... Okay, let's get there, though. So, I don't know, the Bim Blam thing, yeah, we talked about it. Bim Blam, thumbs up, thumbs down on Bim Blam.
Blim Blam
himself,
like 2 thumbs up. I mean, the plot might not, but he gets.
Yeah, but he eats babies, though. Come on.
But I mean, no, it's like obviously, I don't know. I don't mean obviously, I don't condone eating babies.
Is that what you're saying? Are you condoning eating babies, Delaney?
Oh my god. Anyway,
what about space AIDS? What do you think his disease? He's had I have a disease that you might Rick's trying to you might call space AIDS, right? So like
so
that's
then they have like a concept of what AIDS is. Like, what
yeah.
is
How it
this?
is? First of all, how's Bimblem understanding what they're talking about without without
Like,
having
there's no
he
context.
can like understand them but can't produce the language. Interesting. Okay. But then also like he understands Earth idioms like space aids. Not that's not an idiom, but like a context specific thing like that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Blim Blam. Clearly, there's more to Blim Blam than just what we know.
Clearly, that's I think the takeaway here. Anyway, back to a plot. Summer ultimately becomes convinced that Unity is like a morally good entity, which is
Yes.
very fast. She says, "Unity, you're Unity. I don't know if I said that. Unity's great, and you're a horrible influence on it." She says, "You bring out the worst of each other." And then Rick is upset and appearing on the news. Uh,
That
Unity's like, "Are you a
smart.
concerned grandchild or just a buzzkill?"
That was like that is the most cleverly constructed like burn
It
ever.
was
Like
pretty
let me
good,
just
yeah.
turn on the TV.
Yeah, but this what I like about this is it really quickly transitions to this Rick depression stuff that happens at the end. He says something. He says, "You're all human. It runs in the family. I can tolerate it, but I can't give a crap about it."
Yeah.
And then they have a community gag, which is great. They're talking about the show that Unity makes for Rick, and he says, "You cancel it, you put it back on," and as someone who watches Community, it's both Dan Harmon shows, thumbs up reference, I guess, and then they cut to it at some point, like for like the reveal, even though it's obvious. I guess I was surprised that they blatantly show the characters of Community on the show, although this is the way to do it, have them be part of Unity.
Yes.
He said, or Rick says, talking about Summer and Morty, they just put you at the center of their lives because you're powerful, and then because they put you there, they want you to be less powerful. He said that kind of. He's really goes through this really fast, and I had to watch a few times to get the quote. What do you? I don't know. To a certain extent, I feel like we're approaching territory where it's trying to be deeper with Rick than like it is. Like this is all very kind of superficial stuff that we hit on, a lot in this show.
Yeah.
It's not like
Well, I
this
mean,
is really new information.
well, I mean, it's just kind of like with Morty and his dead body's buried in the backyard. Like we get that one like clip with it, and then like I think they mention it one more.
Yeah, they
Like,
reference it. Yeah.
another time, and then we have something like this that like might come up again, but like probably won't.
What do you mean the whole thing at the end with this?
Well, I don't. No, I don't mean with like this episode. I mean, like, like even if this never comes up again, like the ending to this episode will still stand as like being incredible. But I think we'll have to wait to see if like this continues. Like if this will be. Granted, this is kind of. I mean, he's a drunk and like he does all this stuff, and like obviously like there are things wrong with Rick, and he has a lot of deep-seated issues.
Yeah, well, let's talk about this. Like, what's at the root of this
Yeah.
this reaction by Rick at the end? So, Adolsar Wilkins on Navy Club kind of tries to paint this. Not try. I mean, tries. I guess implies that I'm going to disagree with it, but paints this as like a reaction to Rick's feelings for Unity, which I think is interesting. I didn't initially see it that way. Like the way I see it is that Rick is like whatever over Unity, but like this triggers deeper seated things going on with him, and like the meaningless of everything he's doing in his relationships with his family, and like him just putting it all aside and having a good time with Unity for a while, but then having to come back to it. I almost felt like his thing at the end didn't have to deal with Unity at all. What do you think about that?
Well, I agree with both because I actually didn't see the stinger until I rewatched today. Like I don't know how I missed it yesterday, but I didn't.
You gotta look for the stinger.
I don't know what happened, but So the first time I watched it, I was like, this doesn't have anything to do with Unity like this because I didn't see the stinger. I was like, and it doesn't have anything really to do with Unity. Like you said, it triggered it, and there's a lot that goes on with Rick, and like we've seen hints of this before that like Rick. Rick has a lot going on, but at the same time, it's with Unity. I think it might be something he could have but also he kind of latches on to Unity as a way to like this is how he's going to get his feelings out. Like of course he gets drunk and he goes and like pretty much bangs on her door later. Like of course that's what Rick does. Like he chooses to like channel it into that instead of like actually dealing with whatever it is he needs to deal with.
Yeah, I think it's
sense.
interesting. You're bringing up the stinger being related to, yeah, because like at the end it seems like he's just like trying to get her back and stuff, like drunk dialing her,
Yes.
drunk going to her door when they were going to a movie with. Why did Morty think that they were going to a movie? Like, why would that possibly be true?
Let's go.
Yeah.
Like, what did you figure it out when you were in space?
No, I mean they're going to a space movie, but still,
Space movie. It's fair.
Yeah, we should.
Because I mean, we've established that Morty is not the brightest crayon in the box, even though
I
we
guess.
love him.
Even though we love him, I always saw the stinger as kind of like both times I watched separate from like the ending. It's just like the funny thing that happened at the end. But if you see it as related, like Rick's depressed about Unity and not being with Unity anymore, and Unity kind of like because I mean what triggers this is Unity leaving. Where are we in the outline? Notes instead of persons. I think they would be yeah, which is pretty clever. He like picks up a bunch of notes and stuff. Unity says, when I'm with you, I lose who I am and I become part of you. You're better at what I do without even trying. Like, Unity essentially agreeing with Summer at the end, like, Rick's a bad influence on her, so she, leaves. But you could see it as a reaction to Unity leaving him, right? And to me, it's almost like too simple. Like, I want to see this moment as like a culmination of a lot of stuff with Rick's character.
I'm trying to word this without sounding uncaring, but like for all of that to have been done because she like left him is kind of ridiculous because they hadn't seen each other in who knows how long.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that to a certain extent.
That's not even a Rick thing. Like that wouldn't be a Rick thing to do. Like this is very much there has to be more to this.
To a certain extent, like I feel like it is possible because of how feelings work and when you get back together with someone. I'm not the most well versed in these types of things, so it's hard for me to comment on this. Like a lot of the Adder's Awoken Xavier Club review, it's like it's all about personal relationships and about how Rick and Unity are. Their past relationship, their current relationship, and stuff like that. And it's a little bit of this is above my head, and it's harder for me to comment on. So maybe I personally see it in a different way to try to relate to it more. But like, I feel like that's possible. But what I want to see this as is like a character culmination for Rick that goes back to the previous season with Rick's catchphrase and then Bird person being like, "Do you know what that means in my language?" Right? Like that's what I want to feel like this is connected to directly. Like he was already depressed and like feels like everything he does is meaningless. I mean, that's why he's drinking all the time and stuff like that. And kind of that's what I relate this to.
I mean, I feel like it has to be because, like, what was I gonna relate it? Okay, so like we keep having mentions of Rick left who knows how long ago, and then suddenly comes back.
Yeah.
And like his wife's dead, and he like now he's
I don't even remember all that. Yeah.
And Beth is like, yes, or I mean I assume his wife's dead. I guess she could be wherever, but like since your like mother, I think like he had said something when Beth made breakfast one time that made me think that she was dead, but I don't know. And of course, Beth is overjoyed that her father is back. And the comment she makes, you're not going to go that doesn't mean you're going to go quietly portal somewhere and never come back, right? Yeah. So I feel like, and even Rick said something like, oh, I'm just reconnecting with my family. It's something you do when you get old, right? Like there's like, I feel like this kind of going off personal relationships, this has to do with like everything with Rick. Like this is his relationship with his grandkids, his relationship with his daughter.
Yeah.
And his relationship with Unity just triggered it. Like this definitely I think I don't think you can just boil it down to Unity. Like it's all of this and like Rick feeling alone and like his life doesn't have any meaning and then like and the whole comment about they put you in the center of their lives because you're the most powerful and they want you to be less powerful. Like obviously he was talking about himself and all of this and definitely like I really really hope we touch on this more like with Rick like.
Yeah. Like I hope we come back to it, but I also feel like this is a good culmination of this arc with Rick. I agree with you, and I feel like thinking about it more, I feel even more strongly that the episode is being specifically painting this as a line in Rick's character arc dating back to last season, the whole put you in your lives thing. And I feel like you have to talk about how, I mean, let's recap, finishing up the recap. Beth confronts Rick. He says, fun, but who needs it? He creates this thing and then kills it. And then he creates this device that does that. Then he does the same thing for him. And he's about to have the laser hit his head, but then he, like, passes out. Yeah. Just I think very clearly painting it as a attempted suicide by him, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like, you have to look at the severity of this. I know it's kind of Rick, so you want to play it off a little bit. But the episode, I think, is very clearly trying to present this as dramatic. I mean, they have this song at the end, by the way, is called Chaos, by Chaos, Do You Feel It? You can look it up, and I've been listening to it a lot. It's very good.
Yes.
And it's just very clearly painting a mood for the seriousness and, like, the kind of depression that he's feeling and stuff like that. And I feel like this is a great moment. It's a great culmination of everything involving him. It's very sudden. Like, I feel like this episode pivots quickly between this humorous concept that they present really humorously and then going to this. But I feel like they'll also blend it really well in the third act of the episode. And I don't know, it's just very meaningful to me, and it really humanizes Rick, especially in light of everything with Beth confronting her and everything in the B plot.
Yes, like, this is, like, Rick seems more like a person in this episode than anything else, and, like, and of course Rick is, like, we talk about, characters and being fleshed out. Like, Rick is the most fleshed out character, but this is actually, like, wow, like, there is stuff, like, and it looks like we're actually going to get into it and, like, be hinted at more.
I mean, to a certain extent, like, I don't expect it to be presented at the next episode, right? Because, he's not gonna, it's like he doesn't remember, he's gonna not want to talk about it or stuff like that, which is a realistic reaction to what happens. But it's just, I don't know, I felt it was very meaningful. I feel like it's one of the highlights in terms of moments for the entire series. Maybe the biggest non-humor highlight, and to that extent, I feel like this episode succeeds in that.
I think this is a definitely a different kind of Rick and Morty episode that we might not necessarily have had in its entirety before. This definitely wasn't. It didn't hit a lot of. I mean, it was funny. Like, there were parts that were funny, and, like, the jokes were on point, like they usually are. But it didn't hit as high as it usually does, and it was very serious. Not necessarily throughout, but, like, I mean, certainly the entire third act. And it'll be interesting to see if we get more episodes of this type. Like, we were comparing this to the first two episodes, and I don't think we can really compare them, at least in terms. I mean, we can if compare whatever we want, but they're very different kinds of episodes. Like, this isn't your typical Rick and Morty episode, I don't think.
It's better not to view this as the rest of the Rick and Morty episodes, which is hard to do because that's the rest of them, and you're expecting it watching it. I think, like, this episode plays better on rewatch, maybe. I still think the first two acts are a little tiring. I feel like the third act is incredible, and then the first two acts of the episode, and by act, I mean, the thing before the first commercial is the first act, and then in the middle, etc. And I don't think the first two acts play super well. I like the beginning, I guess. I'm not a big fan of them singing at the beginning.
I loved it.
You were. I'm not the biggest fan of that. And I feel like ultimately the episode comes together really well, but in the process, it doesn't necessarily get there. I mean, trying to think of a good, core episode to compare it to, because that's always the go-to thing. It's really strong third act, but not so great acts 1 and 2. Maybe something like I don't even remember the name. The episode before the finale in book 3 of Korra, but we don't need to spend all this time talking about Korra. But I don't know. Do you agree with that? Do you think overall, what do you think of the episode, and do you think the first two acts are good enough to promote this to being a great episode?
The first two acts aren't enough to promote, but I mean, for me, the third act is enough for me to say this was a great episode, like a memorable episode, and like this. But I mean, the first two acts, not. I mean, I think the concept more than like what happens in the episode. If that makes more sense.
Yeah, no, I do like the concept. I mean, it's interesting because they execute it kind of well, but I still think it doesn't get there. Like, maybe that means the concept wasn't strong enough.
Or maybe not the concept, but I don't know. We just don't spend a lot of time on the idea of it itself. It's just more of this is just a mechanism for.
Well, maybe you think maybe you think they move too fast through it. Like, I actually thought that moving fast through the Unity concept is a good idea because of its shallowness. But yeah, it is possible it would have been stronger if they stayed on it more. Yeah, I said that in the beginning. Like, the concept maybe suffers because they transition to Rick's character.
Yeah. But granted, that is the strength of the episode, is Rick in this episode.
Yeah, it's like you push something off that could be a strength to have a strength of something else. It's fine. Ultimately, though, I feel like this is the weakest episode of the season. That being said, if your weakest episode of the season features your best character moment of the series, then that means your default episode is very good, which I think is true of this show.
Yes.
I mean, like, this isn't the strongest start to the first season. Like, I don't think we're quite back at the level at the end of season 1. To a certain extent, it's because I'm getting used to this show. Like, the show is kind of jarring when you first watch it, but in a really good and exciting way. Like, there's not... Like, I know this is kind of just Futurama mixed with, like, Archer or Family Guy or whatever. So it's not, it's not that hard to... It's not like this is the most novel show, but I think it ultimately is, like, a novel viewing experience, at least for me. It's like maybe getting used to it is a little... I
mean, it was for me, and I marathoned it, and I was just like, what am I watching?
Yeah, it's really great in that way, in the what are you watching type thing. And I don't know, I hope the first 3 episodes I think of this season are a very good start if the season like climaxes like the first one does. Like, this is a stronger start than the first season was,
Yes, definitely.
So, like, if we ultimately get the strength of the middle and end episodes of the second season like we did the first season, then, we're looking good for one of the best animated comedy seasons of all time, right? This show, I feel like the show really is that strong and is one of the best shows on television.
Yeah, and it's just incredible, and we take all these tropes and we mess them around, and it's just so funny, like, consistently.
Yeah, and I think this episode was a step back from that consistent humor, but it still was good in other ways. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it wasn't like it was like serious the entire time. Like, there
were great moments. I mean, you pointed out these great lines, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All summer, first race war, huh? I feel like that's maybe the best one. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Best gag of the episode. That's not a segment we should have. Okay. Last thoughts on autoerotic assimilation. I don't like the title. It doesn't really have anything to do with it.
Oh, the title's great.
It has nothing to do with it. It says assimilation in it, but other than that.
Good.
Okay. I'm a little growing weary of these titles, which have nothing to do with the episodes.
I think the titles are great.
Just puns with the character names and at least this wasn't Rick or Morty in the title. There you go.
Which really this episode should have had Rick in the title, but whatever.
This is the episode that should have had Rick in the title, yeah. Yes. Anyway, I feel like, okay, good. Last comments, good?
Good.
Okay, next.
I enjoyed it.
And very much looking forward to next week. To my knowledge, it actually hasn't leaked yet, unlike the first 3 episodes, so maybe that would be good.
The preview makes me...
I haven't seen the preview.
Oh, never mind then.
Oh no, what's it called? At least we can look up that.
Oh, I don't even remember what it's called.
I definitely remember the name for this episode, going from the last one, because it's distinctive. Wikipedia to the rescue, and
I will say this episode to me looks like a not bad, but like a less entertaining version of Meeseeks, but I could just be wrong.
Meeseeks is a high bar. It's
I know.
Whatever that word is, too.
I'd say that. Obviously, it's not like Meeseeks, but like it's hard for me to explain the.
Okay, I don't think you can tell from the preview. We'll see when we get there. This episode, I feel like if we saw the first 2 minutes of this episode, it would not have prepared us for the rest of it at all. So.
No. That's another thing. Like, I say that, but I'm like, they're gonna go whatever with this episode. I'm gonna be like, what is this even about?
Yeah. So we're total Rick call next week. So we're back to the shitty, Rick and Morty inserted into movie titles.
No, this is good. Total Recall. That's great.
No.
I like that.
I'm off it. Let's.
Also, it's gonna have nothing to do with Total Recall, which
obviously, yeah. I mean,
mentioned.
The second episode was called Morty Night Run, and it was only in passing mentioned Midnight Run. So
who knows?
We'll see. Okay. I'm Dylan Hysen, that's Delaney Stovall. You can find our social media information and everything about this podcast at overlyanimated.com. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. We need your support to continue doing, every other day podcast, assuming we're getting back to that. We were off last week. but we're back to our regular schedule now. Huge thanks to our current patrons, Shayna, Hayna, Cordell University, Nate, Nathan Fillion, Beatrice Lestrange, and Fever Mitch. And you can Patreon added little red flags next to people's names saying how long they've been supporting us for. Interesting. You can get your red flag on Patreon.
Get your red flag.
Yeah, that's if you go to the patrons tab, you can get a cool quote unquote nickname and all the other benefits. We're doing our Patreon exclusive podcast tomorrow. So that's for 5 people, so that's going to be fun, good. But you can get future access to that by contributing to the $5 tier and stuff like that. And contact us, tell us your thoughts on Rick and Morty. What'd you think of this episode? Ask me on Tumblr, email us, and that's good, I think. Last comments, Delaney?
I'm gonna go try and find Rick and Morty fan art for this episode.
There's like a surprisingly large fandom on Tumblr about Rick and Morty. You wouldn't think the Tumblr audience.
There's a surprisingly large fandom for everything on Tumblr.
You wouldn't think the Rick and Morty fandom and the Tumblr persons would coincide.
The shock is how much they overlap. Like Korra, Steven Universe fans, and Rick and Morty fans. I'm like, who are we?
I mean, these are the people that should be listening to the podcast because that's what we're covering.
Yes.
Yeah.
These all overlap, and then there's fan art.
Good. Yes. Okay. So thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.